I mean, I think I'm a great example. I was living a crazy lifestyle where I had an office in the city, an office in Westchester, and a home in each. And I never knew where I was putting my head down at night. And it worked, but it was exhausting and fragmenting. And the pandemic actually became an opportunity for me.
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Sayler. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Sayler.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and as always, it's my honor and pleasure to be with you here on another brand new episode. Gosh, we're 7+ years in, and I just still get so excited about the number of guests that we have with so many interesting topics, and I know this is going on that you guys really, when I saw her name and her new book come across my desk, I was like, yes, something I think many of us need. Even if you don't have an autoimmune, grab your friends and family and say, we all got to listen to this, okay? Because we're going to talk about reentry, the new normal or whatever. I don't like the new normal because I don't know. I hope things change for the better in lots of areas. So I'm not sure what that new normal would be. Anyway, let me get on with who we've got tonight. You're going to be so excited because we have Therese Rosenblatt. She's a Ph.D. and a psychologist and a psychoanalyst in private practice in New York City and Westchester County, New York. She treats adults, adolescents, couples, and families, and she also has parenting groups too. How many of us could have used that during the pandemic? For sure. All of a sudden, families are closer than they've ever been in many, many ways. And her brand new book is called How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age. And I'm so excited because to me, there's so many questions I want to talk to her about re-entry. With all of the different changes, some people wearing masks, others not, etc. It can just be anxiety producing, at least for me. Hopefully, maybe you guys might be nodding along, but not have the same anxiety. Anyway, Dr. Rosenblatt, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I am so excited. As you heard in that intro, I really want to talk about re-entry into this. I mean, there's so much confusion right now that we're getting mixed messages from multiple levels that we used to trust. And I find, my first question is about getting comfortable with not knowing, because right now I really know what to trust anymore.
So question is how to trust or just how to manage that? I mean, it's funny that you started with it because the end part of my book, I wrote when the vaccines were starting to roll in, and then post that, I just only finished writing it like a month ago, and things were changing literally every week from the conditions of the pandemic. And I think that we really do have to, this is what I wrote, we have to change our mindsets to embrace uncertainty. And I know there are probably a bunch of people out there listening thinking, but I can't, or I don't want to. But, as I wrap my mind around that, I'm actually finding it liberating. It makes me anxious too. I don't know what's happening with one of my offices where I'll see people in the fall, but because those circumstances are changing related to the pandemic. But then I tell myself, you can talk to yourself. Better not to try that out loud when you're in public, but, quietly in your own mind, talk yourself down off the ledge as I do, and just say, it's okay. What can happen if you just accept that we have uncertainty right now? Why is that so hard? What will happen? What is so terrible about it? So, what if you're a little uncertain about where you're going to work for a few weeks or even a few months? You'll deal with it. You'll roll with it. Many of us are in that boat. It's not illness. It's not disease. We're dealing with that separately. That's a separate issue. And we all have to be happy if we didn't get COVID, or if we got it and didn't die, didn't lose a relative. So put it in perspective and just tell yourself, as I do, we are going into a period where we're not going to have visibility to the future the way we didn't used to, but thought that we did. That certainty was an illusion. So be ready to be adaptable. Use it as a reason to be in the moment. I know that I'm going to start seeing people in person sometime in the fall. I don't know exactly how, exactly when. So I'm staying in the moment of, well, I can still meet with my patients virtually, and that's working. And I'll deal with the next step. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
I'm glad you brought up the idea of, were we ever really certain? Because that came up as you were talking. I'm like, well, that is really an interesting question I asked, because when I think about prior, let's say 2019, I wasn't really certain of what was happening next. As you said, it was an illusion.
Even though at times you might have convinced yourself that you were.
Right, exactly. And now I just find it interesting that now it feels completely different. For me, one of the things that I'm in remission, which is great, but a lot of my audience is not, but some variety of immune compromise. This idea of getting back out in, you say you don't know when you're going to see people in your office again. And for me, it's like, wow, just getting out and even doing something outdoors still feels a little uncertain to me. And I'm still going, okay, this is such an odd feeling, because I call it situational anxiety, because, I can talk to anybody. I'm a professional speaker. I get out there on stage. I don't have a problem with that. But I just find it interesting that in this particular situation, even the unknowns of not knowing, do I wear a mask here? Do I not wear a mask here? What is the etiquette even?
I think that each of us has to find our center and our sort of philosophy. When you say, what is the etiquette? Let me back up for a moment. I think that the first thing that we do is get the facts, ground yourselves in the scientific facts, and get it from a source that you trust, whether it's the CDC guidelines, or I have a wonderful GP internist. And when I'm really just at the point where I don't know, can I have my family over to my house for a weekend? Should I go to this party or wedding, indoors, outdoors? If I can't figure it out myself based on the facts from the CDC, then I set up a consultation with my doctor. I've already decided he's somebody I trust. I vetted him. I trust his decision making. I pose my questions to him. He answers them. And then I don't second guess them. It's like if you go for surgery and you interview 3 surgeons, once you choose somebody you like, you really try to put your faith in them, because otherwise you can't function. So get the scientific facts first, ground yourself in those, and then decide what is the risk. That we all have some risk. I mean, even those of us who are fully vaccinated, it's 95%, not 100. So we all live with some risk. So then decide, what is the risk level that you can live with? And what are your priorities? My 88-year-old parents are visiting this weekend. They're fully vaccinated. I haven't seen them in 15, 16 months. They're pretty safe. They were given the green flag by their doctor, but it's not 100% safe. Well, they've decided at their age, They'd rather come and take that little bit of risk to see their children and grandchildren than sit in grand isolation in their homes. So decide what risk level you can tolerate. I'm not ready to go indoors to restaurants. I occasionally will do it if it's a restaurant that, seems clean, where the space is fairly airy and cavernous and people have a certain amount of space between them. Even then, I mostly don't. Everybody I know is, not everybody, but most are going indoors to restaurants. I can't live with that level of anxiety about wondering afterwards about this, that, and the other. So make those decisions about yourself. And also, talking to an audience, many of whom have autoimmune disorders, go find out what your risk profile is, because the guidelines are given to the general public. But go find out what your risk profile is and act accordingly. And then try to just be at peace with that. I had to make some decisions when I turned down a couple of invitations to indoor restaurant dinners that, if my friend thought I was being silly, I don't really care. I care about them, but not about their thinking I'm silly, because I've made my peace with what I need to do to feel safe, to feel, and what level of risk I can live with. And by the way, can I just for a moment go back to the sort of living with uncertainty, but being in the moment? Well, I don't have an autoimmune disease. I've had a very serious medical event a number of years ago, and I have 2 kids out of my 3 that have a serious medical issue. It's one you can live with very well, but you have to take care of it and keep it in mind. And in the beginning, both for myself and for my kids, I was so anxious, imagining every what if in the world. Finally, it was driving me so crazy that I told myself, okay, at the end of each day, you ask yourself, was today a good day? Nobody got hurt. Nobody was sick today. You're well. Okay, that's great. You'll deal with tomorrow.
I love that. I love that question about at the end of the day. And the audience knows I'm a big fan of journaling. I could see where adding that question to my journal, and so I could reflect back over a period of time that more than today was okay. And I love the metaphor, putting it into perspective of surgery, how often that is not a norm, but something that most of us have had in our life at some point in time, that of course you've made decisions similar to the ones you're being asked to make right now. Right. It was a great metaphor to put it into the similar perspective of, look, you've been there, you've made those kinds of decisions before, and you did a good job on that. What leads you to believe you won't do a good job on this?
Right. And you use your instincts. I remember when I was choosing a surgeon for my medical event many years ago, I met with 3 top people, but only one of them leapt out to me as being the person that I wanted to put my life in his hands. And, a lot of that is instinct, but your instinct is telling you really important things subliminally. You're not always conscious of it. But it's not hocus pocus. That instinct is actually picking up on all kinds of important information that you're picking up unconsciously. And you have to use that and stand by it.
We've got to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, guys, we're going to get more into depth to this. But thank you, Therese. First part of the show has just been what I was looking for. I think this reassurance that, you got this, girl. So
good. I'm glad.
When we come back, we're going to get to more depth to this and some other fun topics. So we'll be right back.
Life Interrupted Radio will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by lifeinterruptedradio.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star Reader's Favorite review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and tonight we're here with Therese Rosenblatt. She's a psychologist and a psychoanalyst in private practice in New York City and Westchester County, and she treats adults, adolescents, couples, and families, and even leads parenting groups. I want to talk a little bit to her about changing relationships. You might have been cooped up with your family for far longer than you ever thought you would be. And we're also talking about her new book, How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age. So I want to get into that too. So, Teresa, I love that first part. It was very grounding for me, brought me into the now, reassured me that I have the skills. We're talking about so many things have changed. I mean, just the idea that you had mentioned you're doing therapy virtually, where probably it was in office, in person, and I'm thinking medical appointments for myself are now virtually. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of, do you think it's going to stay there, or are we going back to what it was? And what are some thoughts you have on laying a new pathway for something different, not going back to the old?
You know, let me first make the disclaimer that I don't predict the future. It's not my job. So I'm not taking any responsibility for anything I say. That said, I have a lot of ideas, and I will share those.
Well, I want to talk about like this. I know that it's sort of sprinkling the sparkly dust here, but you know, I have high hopes that it's going to be very different. So there you go. I don't pronounce the future either, but let's talk in that realm of what if.
Let's play, right? So to an extent, I think it'll be both. I think that we will go back to normal in one sense, in the sense that humans are social beings. We want to be around other humans. We're all a little different in how much we want to be around each other and in what form, but all of us want it in some form. So that will happen. It's already happening. On the other hand, our lives, I mean, I can certainly speak for myself, but I know that I'm typical of many, had really gotten crazy and frenzied and overly global. Too many hopping on a plane, hopping on a car, too many appointments. And I think that is going to shift. I think, and I am going to make a prediction, but nobody sue me if it's not correct. I think we're moving progressively into an entirely hybrid society. And the analogy one of the analogies that I use in my book, since I love to observe fashion, is that I've been fascinated over the years how fashion has become hybrid. At least as a woman, you can wear a dress, you can wear pants, you can wear long, you can wear short, you can wear jeans and dress them up and wear them to a party. Basically, you can choose what you want. I think that our meeting, our forms for meeting, whether it's, not social so much, but more for work-related things, is really, I think hybrid is the way. And I think that for the most part, we'll be working partly in person and partly virtually. And I wrote that in my book. Then, and this was really interesting, then what happened was we really started to reopen. A number of businesses were cool with hybrid. A number of businesses, like internet-based businesses, have decided to work completely virtually. And a number of businesses insisted that their employees come back full time. And I was thinking, I wrote about hybrid is going to be the way. And, employers are pushing for full time. Then all the news stories started coming out about all these people that are pushing back against employers who are insisting that they be there full time. They're quitting, or they're just kicking up a fuss. Not everybody, there are different groups. A lot of young people want to come in. They use work for their socializing. They live in very small living quarters, so they need to get out. But there's a large number of people who either want to work from home or want to work hybrid. And employers are having to do some pretty fancy tap dancing to figure that out. So, and I think also people, for me, in my case, I think I'm a great example. I was living a crazy lifestyle where I had an office in the city, an office in Westchester, and a home in each. And I never knew where I was putting my head down at night. And it worked, but it was exhausting and fragmenting. And the pandemic actually became an opportunity for me to just change that up and change my lifestyle. And I'm now formulating a way to go forward. Well, for one thing, it was a lovely respite to work from home for over a year. I do want to see my patients in person, and I'm formulating a plan where I can, maybe work half the month in the office and half the month from home remotely. So I think that's going to be the biggest change. And then in a more kind of amorphous way, I think many, many people took this as a time to evaluate their lifestyle, their values, to make changes. Many people have consolidated relationships, romantic relationships, that they wouldn't have without the enforced closeness. And then others have split apart, have divorced, or family relationships have been reevaluated. So even a small thing like in New York City, and that's where I am, I imagine it's cities across the country, all the outdoor dining, I think, is going to remain. And it's changed the vibe of the city so that it feels like a much more vibrant European city with all the outdoor dining. I think that'll change a little bit as we're allowed to go back indoors, but I don't think it's going to completely change.
I'm enjoying a lot of the changes myself. I too had a hectic road warrior type of lifestyle, teaching from organization to organization. Much easier to take me there than ship 30 people out here or 50 people out here to do some trainings. And it was a great time for reevaluation. I hear from a lot of listeners in our community who reevaluated many things in their life. And oftentimes it was around their relationship to so many things, including time, learning to set boundaries, learning to say no and feeling comfortable with it. I've had several people email me and say, wow, my greatest gift was I learned how to say no. At first it was hard, but because I had a really valid excuse, I learned how to say no.
I can't tell you how many people and many of my patients privately, confidentially expressed to me their relief in having fewer social obligations and, and having that excuse. And it's not that these people didn't like people or didn't want to see people, but the pace of our lives had just sped up to, I think, kind of an inhuman degree. And I think one of the things that many people have gained and discovered is the gift of time, eliminating traveling in a commute. You can sleep more. If you want, you can work more. I mean, I wrote this book in this time. That was a gift to me. That got me through the pandemic. Exercise, whatever, painting. Somebody I know took up painting. So there was the gift of time. And I think also the gift of being able to look inward a little bit more. We're a very action-oriented society. I have one patient, who sort of said, I'm an extrovert. What do I do? And I said, well, every extrovert has an introverted, introspective side, and every introvert has an extroverted side. Why not cultivate that introspective side? And there's a lot inside of each one of us if we go there.
And how healing that can be.
Yes.
Spending time with ourselves. Oftentimes, one of the things, women are disproportionately affected by autoimmune. And I find one of their top requests is, I just want enough time to take care of my needs.
Yes.
And I see how much that sort of, I'll call it trauma, that sort of having to constantly balance who gets what from you when you're not feeling well. It either was very successful, as you were talking about, it was either very successful or very stressful, depending on how their entire community or family dealt with the situation. And I found that being able to learn to express yourself was really important. One of the things we talk about on the show is being able to express yourself to your medical professionals. But gosh, many of the people that I've talked to on the show talk about, wow, I learned to express myself even where it was a little more dangerous, and that was with my family.
I'm just thinking yes, yes, yes to everything you've said. This morning I was talking to a patient with an autoimmune disease who was addressing specifically the topic of speaking up to one's doctor. The family thing, I think, has been the most fraught. That's been, I think the media has focused mostly on people who are isolated. And of course, that was a terrible problem. Paradoxically, I found, at least, in the limits of my world, the patients that I speak to and the friends and family that I speak to, ironically, many of the people who live alone actually figured out ways to do really well and to sort of focus on themselves and then figure out ways that they could socialize with a few who were important to them. The biggest stress that I've been hearing is from people who are thrown together in couples and in families, in this sort of hothouse of relationships where they have been used to a certain amount of distance. And I think that all relationships are organized around a certain amount of distance. What I mean is, let's take a couple. Some couples have big separate lives and they come together in smaller chunks of time for certain things, and that works for them. Some couples like to be around each other a lot, and if one goes away for a night, they feel really thrown off. But each one develops their own amount of distance. And suddenly the rug got pulled out from under us. We're home 24/7 with a partner if we have one. Families have children coming home who have been trying to launch and, sort of separate and individuate, as we say as psychologists. Grown children, young adult children are coming home used to being in charge, and now they're in their parents' house. There's a, vying for control. I mean, all kinds of dynamics that come up that have had to be negotiated.
Well, and add on top of that, if you've got young kids, you're now a teacher and educator. which I found in my community here, there are a lot of transitioning families to people that have been here a long time, but now a lot of young families are coming in. And one of the things, just kind of, when you're out for a walk and saying hi to your neighbor, was comments on, I'm not skilled to be a teacher, or my child's not doing well in online learning, and it's one more thing I have to concern myself with.
I think other than the people who've lost loved ones or major income through job loss, and they're in a separate category that is so tragic. I hesitate to even put words to it. It's unspeakable. But if you haven't suffered that sort of a tragedy, I think that the young parents, and dare I say mothers, because they do tend to carry the brunt of the childcare, they deserve a medal in this pandemic. I mean, they have been jumping out of their skin, not only having to be teachers and IT specialists, even though that may not be their strength at all, but balancing whether it's their outside employment with their inside job of taking care of children, whether it's, cleaning the house because it wasn't safe for their housekeeper to come in and help them. And now they're all on their own, being teacher, IT specialist, house cleaner, ad agency exec, lawyer, doctor, whatever they are. And most of the kids have not been happy doing Zoom school. So it's not like once you got them on, it was fine. They deserve a medal. I don't know how they did it. I feel lucky that my kids are grown.
Absolutely. I want to reflect on kids for just a moment. If we do have kids, what are a couple of things we should watch out for, as I'm thinking about my own angst in re-entry? But what about if I'm also involved in my one or more of my kids' re-entry into this? Do you have a couple of tips that my angst doesn't rub off on them, and or I'm aware that they might be a little discombobulated right now?
So are you talking more about like school age children who are home?
Yeah, younger children, school age, maybe even teenage ones that haven't launched yet. I can see even high schoolers having a little bit of, yes, I want to go see my friends, but
right. So I think the first thing you have to do is, you mentioned your anxiety, not wanting to rub off. So first of all, you're ahead of the game, because as a parent, you're thinking, you're aware that you're anxious, and you're aware that you don't want it to rub off. So that's number one, be aware of it. It's the person we worry about, the parent who's not aware that their anxiety is bleeding out all over the place. So that's one. Two, use your anxiety and always be honest with your kids, and speak to them about this is a very difficult time. It's weird, it's bizarre. I've never experienced anything like this. We're going through this together. It's hard. Now let's talk about what part of it is particularly difficult for you, your child, and how can we address that? Now, of course, your first obligation is to make sure that they and you are medically safe, and you can talk about that. And then you can talk about what is allowable in a safe way. I mean, for a few months ago, when people weren't vaccinated, you can see your friends, but wear a mask. Or one of my great discoveries during the bad part of the pandemic was my little fire pit. And I spent many a cold afternoon and evening huddled around the fire pit with friends and family, bundled up, throwing logs on the fire, and it wound up, and making s'mores. It actually wound up being really fun. So we're not there right now, although who knows if we have to go back to that at some point, hopefully not, but be prepared. So find safe ways and alternatives for kids who are a little older, like teenagers. a lot of what's coming up, in addition to the difficulty with socializing, is sort of power and control issues at home. Give them an area that they can control, allow them to have some control over their room. Set some basic standards, dishes, maybe no eating in your room, dishes need to be put away, create some chores for them, but give them, and I know a lot of parents get very upset with the withdrawal of teenagers, sitting in a room with a closed door for hours on end. But that's how they enter into the process of becoming their own person separate from you. The other way they do that, or one of the ways, is by a lot of arguing. So when that's going on and you're tearing your hair out, try to remind yourself, it's not really about the argument itself. It's that the arguing is allowing them to say, that's her. I'm different from her. I'm me. Try to see it that way and not be so sucked in. And then, watch out for things that are concerning. If it's time to go back to school or socialize and they're reticent and they're anxious, that needs to be addressed, because avoidance for a kid who's already been anxious, maybe at school, or had some social anxiety, avoidance intensifies that. So you want to talk to them, nudge them, don't push. Empathize, find out what the source of the anxiety is exactly, and offer a very slow, stepwise fashion that they can get back in. But do encourage that. Don't encourage just holing up at home the whole time.
Wow, that was fantastic. We need to take a quick commercial break. But just one of the things that came up for me on that was, I have launched teenagers into the world. And I was thinking, this time, if what had happened during the pandemic, I wouldn't know, is that just normal 14, 15, 16? Or should I be concerned that they're holed up in their room because of the pandemic? My goodness, just another layer of questions on top of all of that. I'm glad you said some of this is absolutely normal, would have happened regardless of pandemic or not. So we need to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in just a minute.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at projectforgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com. And tonight we're here with Therese Rosenblatt. And she's a psychologist and psychoanalyst in private practice in New York City and Westchester County, New York. And she treats adults, adolescents, couples, and families. And she even leads some parenting groups, which we've been hearing about some great ideas about parenting during this time of reemergence. I almost feel like I've been in a cocoon and I just want to burst out as just this most colorful butterfly imaginable. Yet, we've talked a little bit about what the new normal will look like. What are some things that you are seeing that I haven't touched on that yet, that you would like to touch on all the important points in your book, How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age?
Well, for one thing, I want to say about one more thing about, sort of reentry or reentry anxiety is, don't forget, when things are black and white, like when we were first forced into shelter into place, while we had losses, it was very black and white. And in certain ways, it lowered anxiety. We had loss, that was different. But we didn't have decisions to make. But now that we have this bewildering array of decisions to make, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, go inside, don't go inside, socialize, not, when, where, how, working, in office, at home, that raises anxiety for a lot of people. While I think it's really a plus that we're going to have more choices about whether we meet in person or work in person versus online, we are increasingly what I call living online. And boy, did I feel that with therapy, because overnight I went from sitting in this very human, personal way with patients in the office to working with them virtually. And I would include not just online, but a bunch of my patients chose to just meet on the phone. So that was without video. So now, I'm meeting with patients on Zoom, FaceTime, and the phone. I started noticing this just huge array of things that are different when we meet that way. And I think that there are pluses and minuses. I think the good news that I found out was therapy is absolutely doable and can be rich and productive. I'm going to say remotely because I am including phone as well. Don't discount the phone. It's got some real advantages. Yet, on the other hand, there are things that are missing. And I started, and I think this applies to therapy, but also to life, to how often now we meet with people virtually as opposed to in person. There are a myriad of cues that we get from another person that are not conscious, that are not only in the realm of visual or auditory, but there's hormones. I write in my book how at a certain point, way before the pandemic, I started noticing that when a male patient walked into my office, and I'm heterosexual, my temperature went up slightly, even if I was not attracted to the guy. That's a galvanic skin response. I started learning about, since so many people lost their smell in the pandemic, I started learning about how different smells give us a myriad of information about the other person, all happening unconsciously. We've also had a diminishment of the material world when we meet with people. That, it's not just the loss of the human presence and all those cues, but the material world, the sense of touching the couch, turning the doorknob, seeing each other's possessions. So I think that, and I noticed that my behavior as a therapist started changing in subtle but real ways. I talk a little more expressively. I generally don't share personal information with patients. I do it a little bit more here and there because of the need to sort of create work. I have to work a little harder to make that human connection. And then I realized, well, like TV, that's known as the cool medium, Zoom is the same thing, or whatever your platform is. It cools things down. So we're needing to sort of up our, energy level to really make a connection with the other person. So these are all things ways in which we're changing to accommodate to life online.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up. And I'll say this is my irrational passion. My audience knows that the autoimmune hour is my irrational passion. But in my other world, my other job, one of the things I do is talk about communications a lot. And for me, it's how do you take the 2D world of TV/screen/video conferencing and make it a 3D experience.
Exactly. We're talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Understanding that when I was habituated not to talk to my TV screen, unless it was
really, that's good.
Unless it was something I really disagreed with. But most of us don't sit there and worry about what facial expression we're making when we're watching TV, right? Or anything like that. And I think that has changed rapidly, this idea of being able to share what we know, share friendships, or in the medical world. I've noticed that a couple of times with medical professionals I've had, even the placement of their camera and where their head is in my little viewfinder of this video either annoyed me that they didn't look like they were paying attention, although obviously they were you could hear the tapping, they were taking notes or whatever. But it was interesting to me. All of those things would not have annoyed me if I had been sitting in their office seeing that they were, reading my chart notes or whatever. Right. But you can't see those in this little kind of thing. And what I noticed about myself is during the pandemic, how easily I was annoyed at things.
That's so interesting. But you mean specifically online?
Online, yes. How easily I got, because I guess as you mentioned, all that other feedback wasn't coming into me.
I think that's really profound. And I do have my own personal theory. Depression has been on the rise in this country for a long time. And there are a lot of reasons for it. But I do believe that one of the reasons is that we increasingly relate to electronic machines as opposed to people. And we simply are not constructed that way. And I talk about this in the book. I think rather than be a person that cries over spilt milk and boo-hoo, things aren't the way they used to be, electronics, whatever, digital, this is the world we live in. And it's better that we adapt to it than, just criticize it. I'm not saying that you are. I'm talking to all of us. I'm actually speaking to myself more than anything. And that's why I think that we need to think about how do we make better connections virtually? As you say, how do we turn 2D into 3D? And I call it, one of the things I do is what I call painting the room. I am extra attentive to the details of the patient's. If it's on the phone, I want them to, I ask questions. What's going on? Where are they? What are the circumstances? And I may even share a little bit more about my own so that they can locate me, because if I'm in my office, they tend to imagine me always there. If I'm not, it's more imagining me in the ether. So I'll do anything I can. As I said before, I might even be more animated. But the other part of it is, I think, the importance of, again, going back to the hybrid idea that while it's very tempting to say, we don't need to go and see the person. And often that's just what the doctor ordered, no pun intended, is to not go, but to meet remotely. But let's also all make sure that we also fit in the face-to-face contact. That's kind of like water for a plant. We need that.
Absolutely need community. And we're down just to the last couple of minutes. I want to give time. Tell us more about your book, how we can find out more about you, and where we can get How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age.
You can find out more about my book by going to Amazon. And the full title of the book is How Are You? Connection in a Virtual Age. A therapist, a pandemic, and stories about coping with life. Just put that in, it should come up. To find out more about me and what I'm doing, what my background is, what I'm writing, what I'm thinking about, what I'm observing, is go to me on LinkedIn. I don't have another social media presence. So just put in my name, Therese, Therese, Rosenblatt, Rosenblatt, Ph.D. on LinkedIn. And there's a lot about me there. And my book is pretty much described by the title. So if you're interested in virtual connection and or therapy, how it works, how it helps, it's good for that. If you're just interested in finding out about life challenges and how to cope with them, that's all over the book. And it's a good read. There are a lot of stories. It's a story. There's stories about patients. There's stories about myself. And you can enjoy the stories.
I think the way most of us learn is through story, whether it's podcasts such as this, or even metaphor, or finding out that, oh, someone else did that, I can do that too, type of thing. So I appreciate you sharing all of your stories and wisdom with us today. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Community, love you a lot. Check us out if you haven't been over to Understanding Autoimmune on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram lately. Pop over on all of those. It's Understanding Autoimmune. As is the website, understandingautoimmune.com. You can share the link for Therese's, for her show tonight, or any of the other 300 plus shows. And have a great week, whatever your adventures. Join me next week for another new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life, and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at projectforgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.